the record reflects we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our hearing and our alternates are present. Our witnesses back on the witness stand. And Mr. Moline, you may continue your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
When we finished on Thursday, I was going over, we were talking about a statement. Do you remember that?
Statements and checks.
Statements and checks, correct. But you did indicate that you really had nothing to do with the money part of it, right?
Exactly.
In fact, I believe you said that even the checks that Chase gave you, you didn't really look inside the envelope to see what those amounts were.
No, sir.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right. Do you know, because you said that you parted ways shortly after, I guess, the McStay family went missing, you and your father had another
Falling out, yes.
falling out. At that point, were you aware that there was no outstanding amounts due to Metro except for that insurance job?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
Standing also seems that's not evidence.
The relationship with the three of you, we'll just call it the venture because Metro Sheet Metal, Chase Merritt, and Joseph McStay.
Yes, sir.
This venture lasted less than a year, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. In the beginning of the relationship, you actually went to pick up Chase, I guess from Aragon, to bring him over to your shop with all of his tools. Is that correct?
I don't know that I picked him up. I believe you rode with me in our truck, and like I said, we were towing the truck.
Okay. So you would have to go get him over there, right, if he rode with you?
No, he used to have a motorcycle. I think it was a Honda, old Honda.
So did he ride his motorcycle?
To and from the shop, yes. He was.
Well, I mean, from you rode back with him from Aragon's shop, correct?
Yes, sir.
In the same vehicle.
Yes.
So he rode back with you,
Yes.
and you picked him up at Aragon's shop?
No.
No.
No, he had ridden his motorcycle to Metro, and we rode out. I didn't know where Aragon shop was, so he
Gotcha.
he directed me.
So he went to Metro, you guys rode together to Aragon, picked up the tools, rode back.
Picked up the tools and then went by the storage facility, yes.
Great. And at the beginning of this relationship, you actually became friends with Chase, correct?
We would have discussions and talk. I mean, sometimes we'd share lunch or whatnot, but yeah, I never invited him to my house or anything like that as far as a friend.
But you said that you told investigators that you befriended him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then at some point in your relationship with Chase, there was a falling out, correct?
With me and Chase, no, it was with my father.
Well, you had an argument with him about workers' comp insurance, correct?
The argument was that Chase wanted to.
Well, first, I'm not asking what it is. I'm saying you had a disagreement with Chase regarding workers' comp insurance, correct?
In regards to him working in the shop, yes.
You were afraid that if he were to get hurt, that could expose your company to some liability, correct?
Of course.
Okay. And you talked to your father about that, and you told your father that you should have workers' comp insurance, correct?
We do have insurance, or he did have insurance.
But for Chase?
He didn't want to come under that. He had other dialogues with my father that because of him being partners with Joseph, he was excluded from having to have that.
Right. He said he's not an employee, therefore he doesn't need to be covered under workers' comp.
Objection calls for hearsay.
Overruled, answer.
To my recollection, yes.
That was the disagreement with you and Chase, correct?
No.
That wasn't a disagreement?
No.
Okay. Did you tell investigators that that was a disagreement? That you tried to, because of the lack of workers' comp, you tried to rein in Chase's activities?
I tried to rein in on his activity because he was not familiar with the equipment, and at best, he was a butcher when it came to stainless steel. He didn't know how to work stainless steel. So no, we weren't going to allow him to work with any of our equipment or tooling.
Right. And that was, and you had a disagreement with Chase regarding that, correct? His wanting to use equipment that you didn't want him to use?
Yes.
Okay. And that disagreement culminated in actually a shouting match with him on one particular occasion. You
With
recall
me,
that?
no.
Not with
It was
you?
always with my father. I was always trying to keep the waters calm because I wanted to continue working.
And after that confrontation with your father, you were present though, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't say anything, you didn't participate in that disagreement? That
They
day?
both had their say. It didn't get physical, obviously.
And after that encounter, you really did not want Chase around anymore. Is that fair to say?
He wasn't to be trusted, no.
Right. So you didn't want him around, right?
Not in the sense that he wasn't welcome. It was in the sense that one of us needed to be present in order for him to continue doing what he needed to do.
In whatever sense, you didn't want him around, correct?
No.
You wanted him around?
No, not that either.
Okay. And you've actually, because of that dispute that you've had with Chase, you've actually harbored a grudge against him ever since then, haven't you?
No.
Because you like to harbor grudges for long periods of time, don't you?
No.
You were estranged from your father for 16 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You had a grudge against him? That was a long time.
It was. I was a lot younger as well.
And that's what you do. You get angry, you can't control your anger, and you hold grudges, correct?
No.
Okay. And then you showed up here and you testified in court, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You testified about there was an arrangement in this venture with the three parties, correct?
Yes.
All right. Are you familiar with the percentage split between Joseph, Chase, and your company?
No.
Okay. That was something that your father would have worked out, correct?
Correct.
All right. What about with Joseph and Chase? Did you know what their arrangement was?
No.
Did you know whether or not Chase was an employee of Joseph or not?
Chase said they were partners. Joseph alluded to that as well, but Joseph was the money guy.
Okay. But on the issue of whether Chase was an employee of Joseph's or not, you don't know one way or the other, do you?
No.
Okay. Now, this venture that was going to happen was something that you were actually looking forward to, correct? You thought it would be lucrative
Correct.
for your company.
Yes.
And it was, wasn't it?
It started out, yes.
And it was good for you guys because you didn't have to go out to solicit customers, go out in the field. You would do everything in-house, and it cut out a lot of your extra work, correct?
Correct. But that didn't stop us from pursuing other work.
Up until the time that Chase came to you with this water fountain business, your company had never done water fountains before. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And you yourself had never done sheet metal for water fountains, correct?
Specifically for water fountains, no.
So this was new for you in terms of water fountains?
Yes.
Okay. And your testimony was that at some point you had to fill in for Chase because I think in your terms, you said he had been gone for periods of time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Was that in the middle of the relationship, or the end, or the beginning? Do you recall?
This was towards the end.
Okay. Now, do you know what Chase's role was? I think you said that he was in charge of the plumbing and the electrical.
Plumbing, the electrical, some of them were a little more intricate than others. Some of them had etching on the glass, others were stone or tile.
And your job was to do the sheet metal, correct?
Correct.
And there were certain steps that had to be taken to complete a waterfall, correct?
Yes.
So once the sheet metal's done, then Chase would have to do the plumbing, correct?
Which was very basic. Yes.
Now, were you aware of why, do you know what their niche was in waterfalls? Do you know what sold their waterfalls, or what was unique about their waterfalls, I should say?
No.
Okay. The unique part of their waterfall was the fact that the water, even though it's pumping a lot of water into the waterfall, they could diffuse it.
Objection,
have the water
assumes
come
facts
down.
not in evidence, lacks foundation.
Sustained.
Do you recall a custom diffuser that was put into these waterfalls to control water flow?
I do, and I recall us modifying it,
Okay.
improving.
Okay. So you improved that. You've never done a waterfall before, but you improved on that, right?
We did it.
Okay. So were you aware of the diffuser that Chase actually came up with and would put in his waterfalls?
Correct. Yes.
So you would watch him do those diffusers?
I built them.
You built those diffusers?
Yes.
Okay. And you had never done this before?
Again, no, we didn't do water features.
Okay. Now, you were present in an interview with detectives, and at one point in the interview, you and your father were actually together talking to the detectives. Do you remember that?
No, I remember them talking to my father out in the warehouse. They had Carmen in the office, and I waited out in the parking lot.
And you and your dad were never together?
During the questioning, no.
This was on September 30th, 2014.
Okay.
Just take a look at this transcript. It's a short one, so just tell me if you recognize yourself and your dad at this interview. This would have been after you did your interview alone.
Oh, after we did it.
Correct.
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory?
It does.
Okay. So you recall now being actually together with your dad at some point after your interview alone. You guys are together and the detectives are talking to you both.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall your dad telling the detectives that you actually never worked on any of the...
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
You never worked on any of the Chase venture projects, did you? You didn't work on one of them.
I'm sorry?
You didn't work on any of the Chase, Joseph, Metro Sheet Metal Venture waterfalls. You didn't even work on one of them, did you?
I worked on all of them.
Name one. Name one job you did.
We did one that went to a desert resort. We did the Paul Mitchell, and
What did you do for the Paul Mitchell?
all the same steel work. The water, the trough that held the pump and the water, all the uprights, everything that would hold the glass in place. Again, we did the one for, you said Saudi Arabia. I knew it as Dubai.
So, it would be incorrect if your dad said you never worked on any of those?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this. After the plumbing and the electrical is done, a video is taken of the waterfall in operation, correct?
Correct.
And then that video was sent to the customer?
We were told it was sent to the customer show operating or functional water feature, yes.
And then you said that Chase would crate it. Is that right?
Yes.
And that means taking the entire waterfall apart.
No.
No?
No.
Crating it means putting it in a crate.
Around it. Build a crate around it.
Okay. So, in its existing form?
Yes.
Okay. That was your understanding of how it went?
I helped them build some of the crates.
Okay. And then it would be shipped out, correct?
Yes.
And then it would be installed, correct?
Once it left our facility, I don't know what they did.
Well, who did the installation?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you ever do any installations?
No.
And it would be a problem if you took a video of a waterfall or water fountain and then it never got installed at the customer's
Most
place,
definitely,
right?
yes.
They would come back and want their money or something, correct?
Yes. In
And
fact,
that-
there was one that was damaged during shipping that came back.
Right, that's the one with the insurance, correct?
Yes.
Now, to your knowledge, are you saying that you don't know whether or not Chase installed the waterfalls?
Some of them weren't as big to need an installation.
Listen to my question, sir.
They came in
Are you
various
aware,
sizes.
do you know whether or not Chase installed any of the waterfalls? Yes
I
or no?
believe he did, yes.
Okay. And these waterfalls were all over the country, right? They weren't just in Azusa, were
No.
they? They were not only all over the country, but all over the world, right?
The only one that I know of was the one that went to Saudi Arabia.
So if Chase had to install these, he would have to go to the facility, wherever it was,
Mhm.
and install it, and then come back, right?
If in fact they needed it to be installed, I would imagine so, yes.
And that would take time, correct? Especially if it was not in Azusa and it was in another state or another
Yes.
country.
Yes,
Okay. You mentioned too, Paul Mitchell and Saudi Arabia.
yes.
Okay. Those are quite a distance, correct?
The Saudi Arabia project was the last one, and like I said, shortly after that, we parted ways again.
Do you know who went to Saudi Arabia and installed that waterfall?
No,
Okay. Do you know who went to New York and installed the Paul Mitchell?
I believe Chase did.
Okay, so that was towards the end of your venture with them, correct? Or your involvement in it?
No, the Saudi Arabia one was, Paul Mitchell wasn't.
Okay. So, but Paul Mitchell wasn't at the beginning, was it?
To be honest, I don't know exactly if it was, where in the timeline it was.
Okay. So it wouldn't be so far-fetched for Chase to be gone for several days if he had to go install the Paul Mitchell one, correct, in New York?
If you had to go install that, correct.
Okay. Now, your testimony was that Chase did not have free access to the shop at Metro Sheet Metal, correct?
Correct.
And he did not have a key, correct?
No.
Okay. And you know this because you and your father talked about that?
Yes.
Okay. What about Carmen? Did you talk to Carmen about that as well?
Later on, Carmen was instructed that, Chase wasn't to have free access to the shop. And for that reason, I made it a point to keep the roll-up door in the back closed, forcing him to come through the front office.
Okay. When was this? Was this at the beginning, or was this at the end, or was this the entire time he was there?
It was a gradual, as things would get heated between Chase and my father.
So sometimes he would have access, and sometimes he wouldn't?
No, only when we were there.
Okay. So, in the beginning, did he have access to the shop when he wanted to come?
As long as we were there during working hours.
So it was always when you were there, or
Yes.
your dad?
Yes.
It was never, if you guys weren't there, he couldn't come. Is that your testimony?
Shouldn't have been in there, no.
Okay. Well, if you said he didn't have a key, he
He
wouldn't.
didn't have a key, but he could have.
Just, can we get one at a time, please? Thank you.
Carmen was at the shop, and should he have come when Carmen was there, then she would know.
Well, I mean, you could tell Carmen that the policy was if he's not supposed to be there, right?
Objection
That's-
argumentative. Ask
Oh,
him.
overruled.
Yeah.
Did you ever tell Carmen that?
I don't know if I did. I'm pretty sure my father.
Okay.
Father
So then
had that.
Carmen would listen to your father, right?
Yes.
Okay, so even if Carmen was there, he was not allowed if you or your father were not there.
Correct.
Okay. Were you able to learn about the type of relationship Chase had with Joseph?
It didn't concern me. Like I said, I had other projects aside from the water features to fabricate.
You indicated earlier on direct examination that you had occasions to have conversations with Chase, correct?
Yes,
Because at some point you had befriended him and you guys would talk.
correct.
And he described Joseph to you and he talked about Joseph, correct?
We weren't talking about really Joseph. It was usually the conversation was towards gambling. He had mentioned to me on one occasion, because again, I don't care to go to Vegas. I don't gamble. But that there was a system that if you bet a
I
certain
know you
amount.
want to answer questions about gambling. I know you want to throw that out there, but I'm not asking you about that. What I am going to ask you, though, is to take a look at page 69 and see if this refreshes your recollection as to what you guys talked about when it came to Joseph. Let's see. Yeah, line 21.
Again, on one occasion, yes, he did. He did say that they were friends.
Objection, hearsay.
Does that refresh your memory?
Overruled, Mr.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Chase talked to you about his relationship with Joseph?
Yes, briefly.
All right. And he said it was
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
he described his relationship as a healthy relationship, a really good one, and it was a long, good relationship.
Objection, hearsay. Move to strike.
Overruled, please.
Is that correct?
Yes, he had mentioned on occasion they would discuss business, which seemed awkward lying in bed.
And in fact, you had told investigators that you had no reason to doubt that, because when you saw them together, they seemed fine together. Remember that? You remember telling investigators that?
Again, I've only met Joseph
My question is, do you remember telling
2
investigators
times.
that?
So yes.
Okay. And you also told investigators that you were not aware of any problems that Chase and Joseph would have had between those two.
I wasn't aware of any, no.
Now, there was a meeting that took place when Joseph actually came to your facility, correct?
Yes.
On 2 occasions, correct?
2 that I can recall, yes.
One at the
I don't
very-
think he's been to the shop more than 3 times, but 2 for sure.
One at the very beginning when you guys were outlining what the agreement was going to be and what role each party was going to play.
Yes, sir.
And one time when there was, the other meeting was when there was a problem.
There was an issue, and I don't recall exactly what it was. Like I said, Chase and my father butted heads quite a bit.
I'm talking about Joseph.
Okay, yeah, no, he came, but I don't recall exactly what it was about.
Do you recall telling investigators that you were present for that and you heard?
I was.
Okay. And the issue at that meeting, the second meeting, was that your father was upset because Joseph wasn't telling your father what the selling price of the fountains were. Do you remember that?
There was, yeah, some issue with that.
And your father was upset because he wasn't able to then quote the appropriate amount so that he could make whatever profit he wanted to make. Correct?
He just felt that, yeah, he wasn't being forthcoming with what the fountains were being sold for and where his price should be.
And your father was angry about that, correct?
I'll describe angry.
He called Joseph a crook.
It's possible.
And he told investigators, you were present for this, when he told investigators,
Objection, that would call for hearsay.
Operative fact.
Overruled, please.
when he told investigators that Joseph was a crook.
It's
Right.
possible. My dad does Well, I have to handle it, yeah.
Objection, move to strike lacks foundation if it's only possible. He doesn't say permitted.
Overruled.
And Joseph's position, that he told you and your father at that meeting, was that I can sell my waterfalls for whatever I want. You don't have a right to know what I'm doing. I give you a job, and you bid on it, and that's your price. Why do you have to know what I'm charging?
Objection.
Right?
Calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
I believe there was something along those lines, yes.
And Joseph left that meeting never telling you never agreeing to tell you or your father what the selling price was going to be, correct?
I believe that is correct.
And your dad swallowed that because you guys needed the work. And it was good work for you.
No, he wanted to cut ties with him because it was becoming more of a problem than.
You said yesterday you wanted to cut ties with Chase, but really you wanted to cut ties with Joseph because Joseph, as you said, was the money guy, right?
Joseph was the guy paying the bills, yes.
Okay. So if anybody needs to cut ties with anyone, it would be with the person that's in charge, the one with the money, correct?
Not necessarily, he wasn't.
Just a minute, the objection sustained is argumentative.
Your father wanted to stop doing business with Joseph because he felt Joseph was treating him unfairly.
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
You would have to ask my father that.
Do you remember somebody by the name of Dan Kavanaugh?
I didn't hear that name until the McStay family went missing.
Do you remember the detectives asking you about that in your
I do.
September 30th, 2014 interview?
I do.
And you told them that Dan Kavanaugh was a third guy in this venture.
Yeah, he was somebody that I had no knowledge of.
But you remember telling detectives that you were actually present for some of the conversations that Dan had with your father, Dan Kavanaugh.
At the end, yeah, because there was some issues with the Saudi Arabia job.
And one of the disputes that came up with Dan Kavanaugh was that Dan Kavanaugh was calling your father and you and asking, what are you guys doing with
Objection.
Joseph and
Hearsay.
Earth Inspired
Lacks
Products?
foundation.
The objection sustained is hearsay as phrased.
Your Honor, it'd be an operative fact, it's not proving a fact. It's just
Objection sustained.
You do recall that Dan Kavanaugh called up before Joseph went missing and wanted to know who the heck you guys were.
Again, objection. Lacks foundation. Hearsay.
He can answer if he had any discussions with Dan Kavanaugh or was present during any discussions with Dan Kavanaugh.
I wasn't. Any conversation?
You were or were not?
I was not.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never spoken to Dan.
What about overhearing a conversation where your dad was on hands-free?
No.
You don't recall anything like that?
No, sir.
I'm going to show you some waterfalls. And if you could just tell me if you recognize this, okay? This would be Exhibit 744. Let me show it to you first. Let's see if you recognize it.
No, apparently not.
No.
You don't recognize 744?
No, sir.
Okay. You recognize 741? recognize 742.
I couldn't say yes or no. I haven't, I don't believe so.
How about 743?
No.
So it would be fair to say that you didn't work on any of these four, correct?
No.
Okay.
Objection assumes facts not evidence that it's four individual ones. Lacks foundation completely.
Overruled. Mr. News.
Now, regarding that missing check, talk about that. You said that, I think your testimony was that you overheard a conversation where Chase was supposed to bring a check from Joseph,
Yes.
and you guys never got it? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. And was it you that called Joseph, or was it your father that called Joseph?
No, my father was the one that always communicated with Joseph.
But you happened to be there for that conversation?
No.
So when you testified that you heard that conversation on direct examination, when you testified, you didn't actually hear it?
When my father spoke to Joseph about it, I was in and out of his office.
So you heard what, bits and pieces of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And to your understanding, there was a check that Joseph had given to Chase, correct?
Yes.
And since all the checks that counsel showed you were
He
made
hasn't
out of
showed me
metro
any
sheet
checks.
metal,
Yeah.
Objection. This states the evidence.
was
Just a minute. Or sustain this phrase.
the checks that you got from Joseph were made out to metro sheet metal, correct?
Again, I didn't look at them, I didn't see them. They either went direct to Carmen, or if it was handed to me, I handed them to Carmen, or my dad.
So you don't even know who they were made out to?
No.
Usually, if you receive a check, wouldn't it be made out to metro sheet metal?
Objection calls for speculation. Lacks foundation.
Overruled. Your answer.
I would imagine so, yes.
So if Chase got a check for metro sheet metal
Mhm.
and it was missing,
Mhm.
I think counsel showed you a transcript where you said that he went and bought materials or supplies or other supplies or something like that?
That he had said that he had used it to buy materials for a project.
Okay. Do you know what the amount was?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the amount was?
No.
Do you know how it's possible that Chase could go to a store and use a metro sheet metal check and buy supplies?
Objection assumes facts not evidence.
Sustained also calls for speculation and conclusion.
You just kind of made that up, right?
Objection,
the
argument,
missing
yeah.
check thing?
Sustained.
Well, are you confusing the missing check thing that you testified to with the check about the insurance company?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
No.
Because the insurance company dispute with your dad was that, your dad and Joseph, was that Joseph actually got a check from the insurance company on a damaged water fountain.
Objection assumes facts not evidence.
Sustained.
Do you know what the dispute was regarding the damaged waterfall? The water fountain?
I don't know that there was a dispute. They had already discussed that the insurance was going to pay for the unit. We remade the unit, rebuilt it. Shortly after that, the McStay family went missing.
You didn't get your money when Joseph was still there and you had rebuilt that unit. You did not get paid for that unit. correct?
Objection, lacks foundation, calls for speculation.
Overruled. You can answer if he knows.
Again, you would have to ask my father that.
Well, you mentioned earlier, you're talking about the insurance or the damaged unit. Remember that? So you know there was an issue regarding a damaged unit, correct?
Yes, I had to rebuild it.
What was your understanding of the issue regarding the damaged unit?
I don't handle the finances of that. I was in the back fabricating.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hearing on redirect.
A couple brief things. Mr. Sequeida, you talked about on cross-examination about an issue with workers' comp insurance and whether the defendant was covered. Remember that?
Yes.
Do you recall in any of the time that the defendant was in or around working in Metro Sheet Metal, him being injured in any way on stainless or on a machine or anything like that?
No, sir.
Suffering any cuts, broken bones, things dropped on his head?
No, sir.
Were you ever made aware of any problems with Metro Sheet Metal's bank accounts?
No.
What jobs were you, did you have to work on due to the defendant's absences?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What jobs, if you know, which projects, did you need to fill in on towards the end of the relationship when the defendant was absentee?
I don't. Again, if it was pretty basic, the plumbing, the PVC, run some PVC pipes, some elbows, the electrical for the pump, anything that was more complex as far as lighting, my uncle would take care of that.
Did you, other than the two that you mentioned, knowing by name, the Paul Mitchell and the Saudi Arabia, Dubai job,
Yes.
did you necessarily know them by some product name or customer name or anything like that?
No, we would issue job numbers.
You mentioned on cross-examination that there were multiple disagreements with your father. How many of those were you present for?
At least 3 or 4.
Of those 3 or 4, what was the topic of the disagreement that you heard?
Again, just the absence of Chase and Chase wanting to be able to utilize the equipment. And my father wasn't going to let him do that.
Any other issues?
Not that I can recall.
You said on cross-examination the defendant was not to be trusted. Why?
Again, because his lack of experience utilizing the equipment. His welding skills weren't consistent with what we wanted to put our name on. We specialize in custom stainless steel. And based on what we saw when we picked up prototypes and what was seen at Aragon shop, we weren't going to allow him to use our equipment.
Any other reasons why you personally did not trust the defendant?
No, I just wanted to do the work.
Did your statement of the defendant not being trusted, was that influenced at all, that opinion influenced at all by what you had heard from the Aragon shop and the third party that arranged Mr. Merritt to come over to your shop?
Objection to the meeting, no foundation.
It was a yes or no question.
Objection sustained, calls for your assent.
Without telling us what you were told, were you given information by that third party and the people at the Aragon shop that influenced that opinion? Yes or no?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Anything on response?
Let me get this straight. When Chase, you heard something that influenced your opinion, but you still brought him over to work in your shop, right? Yes or no?
Yes, but any
Okay.
of the work he was going to do was
I didn't
utilize
ask anything other than a yes or no question, okay?
Yes.
Next, you wanted him out of the shop. So when he was out of the shop, what, did you want him in?
Objection, argumentative is vague as
You
phrase.
said you wanted him out of the shop. You wanted to limit his ability to be in the shop, correct?
We wanted to minimize,
Right. So when he was gone, that was somehow a problem.
no.
I thought that's what you wanted.
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Nothing further.
No further.
Anything else?
No.
The one check that you mentioned that there was a discussion about Mr. Merritt received a check from Joseph, was supposed to be given to the business, it wasn't. There was a conversation between your father and Joseph, which you were a part of. Do you know what project that check related to?
You know, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
If I may, Mr. Sequeida,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moline asked you a question that you attempted to answer and he cut you off.
Yes.
Why did you not trust the defendant in wanting him out of the
That's
shop?
an answer.
As an extra relevance and outside the scope of the court's question.
Nothing further.
Anything else? Any objection to Mr. Sequeida being excused?
Doesn't really call.
Sure. Thank you, sir, for your attendance, and you are excused from the courthouse. If anything else comes up or we need anything additional, I'm sure they know where to find you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if you can call your next witness.
People will call John Bluth, please. Bluth.
Do you solemnly state the evidence in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
See?
State your full name and spell it for the record.
John Charles Bluth, B-L-U-T-H.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
John Charles Bluth, B-L-U-T-H.
Can I ask you to keep your voice, try to keep your voice up so we can all hear you and speak directly into the microphone? Okay? Right, you may proceed.
How are you this morning, sir?
Fine.
Okay. What general area do you live in?
Apple Valley in San Bernardino County.
Okay. And do you have a hobby riding dirt bikes?
Yes.
Whereabouts do you ride them?
In the desert, all over.
All over the big desert.
Well, you know, where it's legal.
Okay. Are you familiar with an area off of Quarry Road near Stoddard Wells Road?
Vaguely. I don't ride out there very much.
You're familiar with the county dump is out off Stoddard Wells Road, are you?
Yes.
Back on November 11th, 2013, did you happen to be in that area?
Yes, I was.
Dare I ask what you were doing?
You can ask. I was riding. It was a holiday.
You remember what holiday?
Veterans.
And what were you riding?
Motorcycle, Kawasaki KLX 650.
Just out for a pleasure ride on the long weekend?
Yeah, yes, just getting exercise and checking around
Okay. Were you alone or with others?
alone.
At some point, did you find something that you found interesting?
Yes.
Can you tell us how that happened, please?
I was traveling on a dirt road and glancing off the road to my right, which would be north, looking for trails. And I thought I passed the trail, but I wasn't sure, so I kind of went up a ways, went off the road, and circled back towards that, to angle towards it. Well, I didn't find it, the trail that is. On the way back to the dirt road, I stumbled across the remain.
Okay, so you saw something that attracted your attention.
Yes.
At the time, did you know what it was?
A bone.
Okay. Did you know what kind of bone?
No, not for sure.
What was it about, what about it attracted your attention to make you stop and go, hey, what's that?
It just looked out of place. It was a bleached white bone. It was round. It looked like a tortoise or something like that.
Let me show you what has been marked as exhibit number 351. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes, that looks. Yes.
Does that appear to be what you found?
Yes, it appears to be.
So you mentioned at the time that you didn't know exactly what it was. What did you do?
I stopped and I put my bike on the side stand. I walked back and I looked at it and I thought that might have been a human.
So what did you do?
I went back to where my bike was, which was on a little hill, and I called the sheriff's, or I called 911.
Why'd you call 911?
Well, in case it was somebody, in case it was a baby or something like that, I thought we better know about it.
This morning, did you have an opportunity to listen to your 911 call?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask permission to publish exhibit number 571, the recording of the 911 call, along with 571A, the transcript that Mr. Bluth reviewed this morning.
Any objections? Okay. So let me give you a couple of cautionary notes about listening to any tapes. Like, not going to be the first time we're listening to tapes. The transcript that you're being given is only an aid to help you hear what may be on the recording. What is evidence is what's actually on the recording. As I say, sometimes if something on a recording is not real clear, if you have the words in front of you to follow, you can say, oh yes, now that I see that word, yes, I can hear that's what's being said. And that's fine. But if you can't hear it, the fact that it may be on the transcript is not evidence. The transcript is not evidence of what was said unless someone testifies to yes, that's what was said. So if you hear it on the recording, it is evidence, even if it's not on the transcript. If you can't hear it on the recording, it's not evidence unless someone else testifies, yes, that is what was said. Second thing, if you're going to take any notes on this, take the notes in your notebook, not on the transcript. Because after we play it, we're going to take the transcripts back from you. So if you take notes on it, you're going to lose your notes. Okay?
We did not test this out this morning, so we're going to give the audio a good...
Counsel wanting to stipulate the reporter need not attempt to transcribe the recording as it's played, but the transcript, Exhibit 571A, would substitute for the court reporter's transcript.
Stipulate.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it coming through, Mr. Jackson? No. Mr. Dowdy's going to fix my technological oversight. Let's try this.
Please speak with the transfer.
How can I help you?
Hi, I'm out here on a motorcycle out behind the dump, and I found what looks like a human skull.
Can you give me a location?
Yes. Okay. West of the 15 and north of the stockpile where the dump is.
Did you take the freeway there?
No.
I need some cross streets, so I need to know how you got there. I need a starting point.
Okay. Let's see. Stoddard Wells Road at the 15 undercrossing.
North or south? 15.
It would be on the south side lane. Let's see, maybe I should just call the local sheriff and tell him where it's on a map, because it's all dirt roads.
I understand, but I'm just looking for a starting point. And this is the local sheriff.
Oh, okay. Starting point. Start at the 15 north Stoddard Wells exit.
Okay.
Now we come from Victorville.
Okay. Let's see, is it over by the landfill?
Yes. It's within, I'd say, about a half mile of that landfill. It's directly to the south of me.
Okay, so a quarter mile from the landfill?
Yeah, if you were to line yourself up with that landfill pile, I'm directly north of it about a half mile, I'd say, maybe less.
Okay. I'm trying to think of the name of the landfill.
There's a nice dirt road that comes right up. And I believe it begins to be paved right there in the freeway.
Okay, so we take the 15 north and exit Stoddard Wells. Where are we going from there?
You're going to go north to, I'm trying to see the street here. Dale Evans Parkway, I believe it is.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm kind of mixed up because of Stoddard Wells, Bell Mountain. Okay, Stoddard Wells, Bell Mountain is what's on the freeway sign just to the east of me.
Okay, but we're still exiting at Stoddard Wells.
Yes.
Okay, then you go north to the Dale Evans, Bell Mountain.
You go north to the crossing where it goes under the freeway to the dump, which is the landfill.
Okay, so from the landfill, where are you?
Due north, approximately, I'd say a good 2,000 feet.
Okay. Did you find it in the landfill or just in a field out there near it?
In a field.
Okay.
I was hanging a U-turn and I stopped to usually the dogs and stuff, but this one looked brown, so I looked at it. It doesn't look like a dog.
Okay. So you're going to be 2,000 feet north of the landfill?
Yes, in fact, there's a fence. There's a corner of a fence right next to me, and I think that's the landfill's property.
Okay.
So I'm on the outside of that.
Okay, what's your name?
John,
Last name?
Bluth.
And your phone number is 760-900-5074?
Yes, that's my cell phone.
Okay, and you're on a motorcycle?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the street from where you are?
I can only see a dirt road that runs east and west, and I'm within 50 yards of that.
Okay,
I can go.
I'm wondering if they're going to be able to find you.
Well, I can leave them somewhere.
Okay, do you have like an open area there? A good place where you can meet the deputy?
I can meet them nearby.
Where at?
Stay at the landfill toll gate.
Okay.
That would be close. And there's people there.
Okay. All right. I will go ahead and put in a call for service, okay?
How long do I have to wait out there?
Hopefully not too long.
Okay.
All right, yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Do we want to collect those now or continue this examination, Your Honor?
We can collect those first.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bluth, can you tell us, or do you recall how you handled that bone, if at all, when you discovered it or after you discovered it?
I believe I turned it over with the stick.
Okay. Did you recall ever like touching it, manipulating it, picking it up, throwing it, anything?
No.
Did you meet with law enforcement at the dump gate entrance?
Yes.
What happened after that?
He followed me over to, I had a long piece of a bush that I had placed so I can remember where it was. And he followed me to there and I walked him in.
Him being a deputy?
Yes.
After that, were you involved in this anymore? Do anything else?
No, we walked in there, walked up and down the little rivulet, and then we went back to his car and he called the forensic team because he wasn't sure too. And then we talked for a bit and then he let me go.
Okay. You used a word, I don't know if I missed it or I didn't understand what you said, a rivulet?
Yeah, a little, like a channel where water goes through.
Okay.
A river, but you can tell water was going down a little. There's like hills.
Okay.
And this was a low point where that was.
Where water had flown?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Cross.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Jacob Gerard for the defense. Just one question. I want to clarify. When you found what you believe was a human skull, you did not touch it?
No, not with my hand.
And when you found the human skull, you described you were in a rivulet. Is that right?
Can I object that he said one question and we're on two?
My apologies.
Well, I don't think it's like, not on a map, but it's just a contour of the land where it's a low point where water would go through.
And what were the weather conditions when you found what you believed was a human skull?
November-ish, partly cloudy, cold, windy probably a little bit.
And what were the ground conditions when you found it?
Dry.
I'm sorry, you said dry?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
No, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any objections to the witness being excused?
No, Mr. Bluth may be excused.
No
Okay.
objection.
Thank you, sir, for your attendance, and you are excused. Any part of your witness?
Sergeant Hart, please.
Do you solemnly state the evidence you'll give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Have a seat. State your full name and spell it for the record.
Gary Hart, G-A-R-Y, H-A-R-T.
Okay, may I proceed?
What is your occupation, sir?
Currently, I am assigned as a sergeant, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, to the Rancho Sheriff Station. At the time of this incident, I was a detective with San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department Homicide Detail.
How long have you been a sworn police officer in the state of California?
A little over 23 years.
in your assignment with Homicide, how long were you with the Homicide Division?
Approximately 4.5 years.
And were you in that assignment back in November of 2013?
I was.
Specifically on November 11, 2013, were you dispatched to an area north of the city of Victorville in, I guess, the unincorporated area near the dump?
Yeah, I would have been dispatched by my supervisor, Sergeant John Gaffney. He contacted me and advised me of a death investigation that our team would be investigating.
And based on that phone call from your Sergeant Gaffney, what did you do?
I responded to the location, started Wells on my 15.
Can you give us a little introduction to how a homicide team is composed and how it works?
So homicide teams are comprised of 4 detectives and 1 sergeant. When a death investigation, homicide, suspicious death, several other types of investigations as well. When one of those comes out for investigation, that sergeant of the team is notified of the investigation. It's his determination as to whether or not the team will respond, and then he makes contact with his detective to respond as well.
And when a team responds to any type of investigation like that, are you assigned certain tasks or duties?
Yes, initially we sit in on a briefing. We're given the basic circumstances of what is going on, and then it's outlined a plan as to how we're going to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just a little bit louder, I guess.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Then it's outlined by the sergeant how we're going to progress with the investigation and who will take on each of the tasks.
And did that occur in November of 2013 when you responded to that area by the dump?
It did. This one was run a little bit different, just because of how it was set up and the time of day we initially received it and what we had. But yes, it was run in the same fashion.
Well, what made this unique and different?
Well, this was a situation where it was human remains were buried in the desert. We were running out of daylight. Normally, we would initiate the investigation immediately, but because of the excavation that had to occur, we delayed that excavation until the following morning.
Ran out of daylight.
Correct.
When you initially went out on the 11th, what personnel was out there, if you recall?
There was myself, Sergeant Gaffney, Detective Charles Phillips from the Victor Valley Station, Detective Eddie Bachman, Detective Mondo Avila. I remember who else was there when I first arrived, but I don't recall anybody else.
Was any searching, investigation, or anything done that first day on the 11th?
We took a look at the 2 grave sites that have been located. We didn't do any active searching. The initial call, I think, came out around 3 p.m., so our amount of daylight was very minimal. And based on what we had, we opted not to do any active searching that night.
The next day, did you participate in a search or investigation of that area?
We did.
By the way, did you have to sit up there and secure that scene all night?
No, I was not stuck with that task.
Was someone stuck with that task?
Yes.
Who was that? Do you remember?
I don't. I believe it was a deputy from the Victor Valley Station, particularly his name I don't recall.
The next day, on the 12th, you went out back to the scene?
I did.
And what was your responsibility on the 12th?
On the 12th, we had coupled with the coroner's office and their personnel to basically arrange a line of persons to walk through the desert. And because it appeared as though one of the graves had evidence of animal activity, to put it properly, we were going to have bones that were going to be scattered. So we needed to do basically a line search of that desert area to identify bones and possibly other evidence, which would include clothing, things like that.
So tell us how that went.
We basically just got in a line. We started on the furthest north end, and then we set up a line from east to west. and then we walked south. And as we came across anything we believed to be evidence or of evidentiary value, or we believed to possibly be bone, it wasn't at that point we were going to make determinations of whether it was animal or human. And at that point we were just identifying whether or not we thought it was a bone. We would mark each one of these items with a pin flag. And that's basically just a small metal post with a plastic flag on it. Rephrase that, a metal wire with a plastic flag.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 191. You recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Appears to be a bone that was found in the desert next to an orange pin flag.
Would this be the type of marking that you were referring to during this search?
Yes, some of the bones were larger, some were smaller, but yes, this is how we were marking items found in the desert.
Do you recall specifically whether you were with the people that found this particular bone and this particular flag?
No.
How many people could you estimate were in this search line walking through the desert, if you recall?
Or more.
And so each individual member, if they saw something, would they be able to flag it for people to go back and look at later?
Yes, everyone was given pin flags to mark items.
And how long did this line search take?
It took the majority of the day. We covered approximately 64 acres.
At some point, other than the line search, did your duties or obligations change during that day?
That day, no, I don't believe it was until the following day that we actually started doing collection.
So on the 13th, I take it the scene was then left in the hands of some capable young deputy?
That's correct.
Overnight?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that done, by the way?
It's to maintain the integrity of the crime scene. The scene was basically between the dirt road and the freeway. So the deputy was able to position himself. We could have it watched with one deputy. He could position himself on a higher portion of land, if you will, and keep eyes on the entire area that would include where all of our pin flags were as well. It's just to maintain security of the scene.
So the next morning on the 13th, you go back to the scene?
Correct.
And what's your duties and responsibilities that day?
My duty that day was to accompany Dr. Alexis Gray, who in short is a bone doctor. She knows all about bones and everything. And I was to walk around with her through the desert, go to each one of the pin flags that were set down the day prior, and she would make the determination after examining each bone as to whether or not that bone was human or animal. And we would subsequently collect that item.
And in that process with Dr. Gray, what other steps did you take to document the location of those items?
So we set up, it's a compass that is ground mounted. It's basically just a piece of plastic, and it has degree markers from 0 to 360. And you nail that marker to the ground. And then you set the 0, you have a standard compass that you use that points to magnetic north, and you point 0 on that plastic compass to magnetic north. So 0 is north. And then that stake that holds down the compass that's mounted on the ground has a tape measure that goes around it. And then you can identify, let's just say there's a piece of evidence directly in front of where this ground-mounted compass would be at 0 degrees. I would measure from the stake to the item of evidence. Where the tape measure lines up on the degree markers would give me the degrees from this central point that we've created. And then we would mark it out, let's just say, as an example, 5 feet. So if it's 5 feet directly in front of this piece of plastic that's a compass, it will be 5 feet at 0 degrees. And then if it was off directly to the right, it would be 5 feet at 90 degrees, just to give you an example of how that works. Since we don't have any fixed items to measure from, we don't have curbs or light poles or stoplights or anything like that. we can't use those. We have to use a fixed position. So once we fix our position, we identify that position with a GPS, and that gives us that location. GPSs are only accurate to so close, hence, after everything's measured and we're done, we pull up this plastic compass, and then we run the stake right back in where it was. It's a metal stake. So in the future, we can go out there, if need be, and you can find it with a metal detector and say, okay, this is exactly where they had it mounted, and this is where we measure from.
Showing you what has been marked as exhibit number 241. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yeah, it looks like one of the legs of the awning, some people's equipment on the left, and then off to the right we have a ground-mounted compass and a tape that's attached to the metal pole, or metal stake, excuse me, that I was talking about. And then we also have a compass that's sitting on top of that ground-mounted compass. The second compass sitting on top is the one that identifies magnetic north. Yeah, it's in the bottom right-hand corner of the photo. It's got two tape measures sitting next to it. One of the tape measures is actually attached to the metal stake.
And this would have been the central datum point or scene datum point that you would have done your measurements from with Dr. Gray?
That's correct.
Can you please walk us through the items that you documented with Dr. Gray and their measurements for us?
Okay, the following items we located at pin flags. First one was a first rib, 3 feet 9 inches at 108 degrees. 2 true ribs, 7 feet 108 degrees.
And just for the record, the witness is reading from a list and not from it.
Correct. You can continue.
Thank you, sir. 1 rib head, right side, 5 feet 8 inches, 95 degrees. Tibia, left, 7 feet 3 inches, 297 degrees. Child's rib, left side, 12 feet 8.5 inches, 263 degrees. Child's rib, left side, 7 feet, 265 degrees. Rib scatter, 3 fragments, 16 feet 3 inches, 227 degrees. And for clarification, the definition of what each one of these is was provided to me by Dr. Gray. 2 true ribs, 12 feet 4 inches, 199 degrees. A rib head, 11 feet 4 inches, 60 degrees. Rib fragment, left, 12 feet 6 inches, 50 degrees. Rib fragment, 11 feet 1 inch, 72 degrees. First rib, clavicle, and mid-shaft long bone, 22 feet 5 inches, 99 degrees. Talus, T-A-L-U-S, and first toe, 25 feet 10 degrees. Correction, 25 feet 10 inches, 36 degrees. Fibula, 25 feet 6 inches, 27 degrees. Child's rib, 10 feet 10 inches, 304 degrees. Calcaneus, left, 20 feet 4 inches, 305 degrees. Tibia and patella, 28 feet 4 inches, 316 degrees. Child's rib, 30 feet 6.5 inches, 292 degrees. Scapula, 20 feet 288 degrees. Calcaneus, 21 feet 8 inches, 288 degrees. Humerus, left, 43 feet 11 inches, 288 degrees. Tibia, left, 70 feet, 347 degrees. Foot, right, 47 feet, 133 degrees. Tibia and fibula, 56 feet, 154 degrees. Pelvic bone, 2 vertebral fragments, 78 feet, 170 degrees. Femur right, 81 feet, 171 degrees. Femur left, 85 feet, 172 degrees. Thoracic vertebrae, 85 feet, 6 inches, 174 degrees. Pelvic bone right, 93 feet, 174 degrees. Lumbar vertebrae, 103 feet, 174 degrees. Rib fragment, 90 feet, 167 degrees. Scapula left, 224 feet, 180 degrees. Now the next 5 items were measured from flag number 32. When we run out of tape, then we have to move our measuring device, our data point, to basically another flag. We've already identified that flag's location in reference to the data point. So now I can utilize that flag number as a method of measurement as well, or as a point of measurement.
And what was the flag number that was used, or the item found at that flag that you measured from?
Flag number 32, which the following 5 measurements were taken from, is the scapula left.
And what was recovered in the distance from flag 32?
Clavicle, 39 feet, 305 degrees. Ulna, 67 feet, 183 degrees. Fingers, 84 degrees. Correction, 84 feet, 185 degrees. Humerus right, 90 feet, 184 degrees. Radius, 96 feet, 180 degrees. And then just as the prior 5, the following 2 measurements were taken from flag number 37. At flag 37, there was a radius located.
And what were those items?
8 long bone fragments, 55 feet, 6 inches, 179 degrees. 1 long bone fragment, 99 feet, 190 degrees. And then we're back to standard measurements from our initial data point. Ulna, 67 feet, 6 inches, 245 degrees. Radius, 67 feet, 6 inches, 256 degrees. 2 ribs left, 128 feet, 80 degrees. Rib left, 190 feet, 90 degrees. 4 ribs, right and left, 200 feet, 76 degrees. And there was one last one, I apologize, also measured from flag number 32, humerus left, 59 feet, 210 degrees.
And those notations and identifications would have occurred while you were with Dr. Gray conducting those measurements and angle determination, correct?
Yes.
Then, so is that a total of 45 pin flag locations where items were recovered?
Correct, and as you heard, some of the locations contain more than one item.
And just for clarification, when you extended your measurements from the scene data point, the central point, then from a pin flag out, so that pin flag number 32 seemed to be your one you used, that was already 224 feet from the central datum point, right?
Correct, and if I recall correctly, this wasn't so much because of tape measure length, this was because of the terrain, where it goes up and down. We had some bushes in the way, so we had to change our data point.
So if pin flag 32, the scapula was 224 feet, anything that was measured from that would be added to that 224 feet to get back to your original datum point.
Correct, depending on its direction.
Okay. And when we listed off a ton of different degree angles ranging from very minimal to almost 360 or 305.
Correct.
So that's in a complete circle around where that datum point was located.
Yes.
The items that were pin flagged for recovery and documentation by Dr. Gray None of those items that were recovered were directly recovered from the grave sites themselves by human personnel, correct?
That is correct.
You mentioned earlier the possibility of animal activity due one or more of the graves having some type of disturbance to them.
That's correct.
Would this be something you would expect to see if in fact there was that kind of disturbance, the scattering process
Objection, foundation.
Overruled.
or pattern?
In prior deaths that I've seen in the desert, homicides and subjects who passed away from exposure or whatever issues, this is very consistent with what you would find when animal activity is involved.
No further questions at this time.
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Why don't we take our morning recess before we begin? Cross, about 10-15 minutes. Keep in mind, the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everyone back here in about 10-15 minutes.